All right, so now that we're in XD, let's talk really briefly about the interface and then hop into some of the tools. So at the top, I have a design tab and a prototype tab. The prototype tab is where we add interactions. The design tab is where we actually do our designing, our visual stuff. Up here, I can save and rename my document. Over here, I can change my zoom level. This is where I can actually test on my device. If you have a device like an Android phone or an iPhone, you can install the Adobe XD app on that device and then actually preview it. I highly recommend doing this because the user experience is totally different on an actual phone versus on the computer. So then this play button lets you preview it on the computer, and then this share button is how you're actually going to submit your assignments, but this lets you publicly share your prototypes. Down below this, we have some of these context-sensitive attributes. These change as you click around on different things, and we'll talk more about that later. And on the left-hand side, we have our various tools. Down here, we have a assets pull-out window and then an items or artboards pull-out window. So this, whenever we click this, it will pull out the artboards. So whenever we have multiple artboards, which are kind of like different screens of our prototype, they'll show up here, and this is where our assets, whenever we start making symbols and reusables, they'll show up over here. So let's get started with some of these tools. I'm going to create a simple button with the rectangle tool. So this is going to be my home page, and you can see the smart guides are already popping up, which are kind of showing me, am I centered or centered vertically or horizontally. So I'm going to just drag out a rectangle. And just like in Illustrator, I have these little circles that allow me to add rounded corners. I have different transformation options. And again, all those smart guides will appear. If I switch back to my move tool or my selection tool, which is the top tool here, I can move around my object and get it all centered and nice and pretty. So I can move that around. On the right-hand side, if I look, I have a bunch of things that appear, and we're going to cover these in a future video, but for now I just want you to get used to creating objects. So I can add some rounded corners. Let's click this circle tool or the ellipse tool, I guess, and make an ellipse. The line tool will create lines. The pen tool operates just like the pen tool in Illustrator, where we can click to plot points, or we can click and drag to create Bezier curves, create curved objects. The text tool allows us to input text, both as single lines and as text boxes if we drag out. So if I click, it's a single line. And if I drag out a text, if I drag out a text box, it'll be a box of text. Then below that, we have the artboard tool. This is how we're going to create multiple new screens. And then lastly, we have the zoom tool to help us zoom in and out of our project. I like to just use my trackpad's pinch zoom personally. I find that to be a little bit easier to work with. So that's just a brief overview of the interface and some of the tools. Let's also look at the prototype screen while we're here. So I'm going to click on prototype. And whenever we're on prototype, it's going to say that you need to have multiple artboards. That's fine. I can just click this little X button. And the prototype window simplifies the tools. We only have a selection tool and the zoom tool. And with the selection tool, this is how we actually create our prototypes. We select objects and then we start modifying them with the selection tool. So that's just a brief overview of the design tab and the prototype tab and all the different tools in the interface.